In this video, I'll talk about some ways that tariffs could affect RVing and also some things that you can do to prepare. Okay, so there's a big elephant in the room right now in all of America, and it affects everything, including RVing. So before I get into today's video, I want to be clear about one thing. The tariff situation keeps changing. So in today's video, I will cover potential impacts, but things could shift at any time. One day it's on, one day it's off, the percentages keep changing, the countries keep changing. I am not a fortune teller, I have no connection to the White House, but I thought I would talk about it because it is a big factor, and if you're looking to hit the road here anytime as a full-time RVer or a part-time RVer, this is gonna matter. We have to live in the environment we're in, and money matters for everyone. So the long and the short is, regardless of your political bent, and I'm not going to get into that today, tariffs are inherently inflationary. So essentially what a tariff is, if you're not aware, is it charges another country a percentage of the price to trade with that commodity. So things like steel or whiskey or any different product, it can be put on it. And what happens when the US taxes essentially another country is that the country will do retaliatory taxes back at us. So we can force another country to pay, but they can also force us to pay back. And that's why it's an inflationary policy, because it inherently raises prices. So the first big change that will likely happen with tariffs is that the cost of new RVs will start to rise. And this is because materials like steel and aluminum are getting pricier. And many RV components, things like chassis, frames, various appliances, rely on imported materials. So higher costs will be passed on to consumers. In addition, in response to tariffs, manufacturers of RVs may scale back production. So what does this mean? Well, if there are fewer new models, it could mean longer wait times and limited RV choices. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, surprisingly, and you'll find this in a lot of what I'm talking about today. There are pros and cons. So the silver lining to this one is that if you have an RV and it's used, it's going to hold its value better. Basically, when new RV prices climb because the cost of building materials increases, what essentially happens is that used models will depreciate more slowly. And some might actually even increase in value because they're worth more. There's a similar effect that happened during the pandemic when supply chain ground to a halt with cars and new car prices went up, and the used car market at the same time ended up rallying because the value of those items increased. It's very strange. And so if you have a loan on your RV, you might find that you end up less underwater or above water, so pros and cons on that. The next thing that we might find is that repairs and maintenance will likely cost more, and this is because RV parts could get more expensive. Things like AC units, fridges, batteries, and other various important components might see price hikes. And additionally, some of these parts could be harder to find. If fewer parts are imported, supply chain issues, like we were saying before, might cause delays. And because of this, DIY repairs and renovations could end up costing more. So if you're looking at doing something like solar panels, lithium batteries, and even flooring or cabinetry, they could see higher prices simply because of materials. Okay, so that's kind of in the stuff category. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about travel costs. Let's talk about gas, campgrounds, tourism. So one of the big questions is, will gas prices be affected? That's something that people are asking themselves a lot. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but if tariffs end up impacting oil production or transportation costs, gas could in fact rise, which is a bummer, right? Total bummer. But again, it's not all doom and gloom. Campgrounds might actually be easier to book, which is sort of paradoxical. So what's happening now with some of the tariffs is that Canadian consumers are already boycotting American travel in a retaliatory way. There's been some early stats that some of the bookings are down for Canadian travel to the US. And this is all because of the trade war and trade tensions. So what this would mean is fewer campers in the US during peak season, which means easier to book camp spots. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and that doesn't sound so bad, right? However, there is kind of a dark flip side to that, in that some campgrounds might struggle. So campgrounds that rely on Canadian snowbirds, and there are quite a few of them, could lose business, and they could cut services or close altogether, which would reduce the number of camp spots and kind of make that sort of not a perk in actuality. It's really hard to tell at this point. So the next thing is that we might see fewer dealers and smaller inventories at the RV dealerships. Look, there's no getting around it. If there's less inventory, if prices go up, dealers may struggle. Fewer people are buying. They have their bills to pay too. So because of this, some RV dealerships could end up downsizing or closing, which would further, decrease the number of RVs available. And again, smaller inventory means less selection. If dealers stock fewer models, it may be harder to find exactly what you want. And if there's less competition within the RV dealership space, you might not be able to get as competitive bargains. You might not be able to pit a couple dealers against each other, which I've heard people have really good success with. So pros and cons, pros and cons. Okay, so those are kind of the top level obvious things that could likely happen as things progress. So let's talk about how you can prepare for all of this. All right, so the first thing is if you need repairs, consider buying your parts now. Even if you're not planning on hitting the road for a while, prices might be rising, so it's smart to stock up while they haven't shifted yet. The next thing is that if you are shopping for an RV, getting one used might be a better bet because a well-maintained used RV could offer better value. Another thing to consider is booking campgrounds early. If campgrounds end up shifting their policies or even hiking their rates to offset for Canadian snowbirds not coming to the US, it's better to have your reservations already locked in and the price set. Plus, you'll help them weather some of that. They'll have some guaranteed income that will help them offset the situation. Another thing to do is to watch gas prices and plan your routes accordingly. Now, I know most RVers are already doing this, but definitely keep an eye on your fuel costs and make sure that you're planning your routes in a way that's fuel efficient and saves you a couple of bucks rather than kind of freewheeling it, And finally, consider some alternative travel plans. So if some destinations become too pricey, maybe look at less impacted states or alternative camping options like boondocking or some state parks. That might help. Anyway, RV costs might go up like the rest of costs, but used RVs might hold their value better. Repairs could be pricier and travel trends may shift. That's really the long and short of it. Anyway, I ask you, are you worried about some of these changes? Have you already seen some price hikes out there in the wild? Let me know in the comments if so. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.